Late at night around 11:30, when the world had gone quiet and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, Daniel's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He almost ignored it, thinking it was just another spam notification or a late email from work. But something made him reach for it, his tired eyes squinting at the bright screen in the darkness of his bedroom. The message was from Eleanor, his neighbor from across the street, the elegant woman who had moved in 3 months ago and had barely exchanged more than polite waves with him. His heart stopped when he opened the message and saw a photo attached with a simple question. "Do you think it's beautiful?" He stared at the screen, his breath caught in his throat, because what he saw in that image would change everything he thought he knew about loneliness, about second chances, and about the terrifying possibility of letting someone see the broken pieces he had spent 5 years trying to hide from the world. But let me take you back to where this story really begins, because to understand why that single message shattered every wall Daniel had carefully constructed, you need to understand the man he had become and the woman who would refuse to let him stay that way. Daniel Foster was 42 years old, a single father to a 16-year-old daughter named Sophie, and a man who had mastered the art of appearing perfectly fine while feeling absolutely hollow inside. His wife Catherine had left 5 years ago, not for another man, not because of any dramatic betrayal, but simply because she had looked at him one morning over coffee and said, "I don't love you anymore, and I don't think I ever really did." Those words had carved themselves into his chest like a brand, and no amount of time had completely healed the wound. He had thrown himself into being the best father he could be, working as an architect from his home office so he could always be there for Sophie, attending every school event, learning to braid hair and talk about teenage drama without his eyes glazing over. But at night, when Sophie was asleep and the house fell silent, the loneliness would creep in like a fog, wrapping around him until he could barely breathe. He had tried dating apps, had gone on a handful of awkward dinners with women who seemed more interested in his house than in him, and had eventually decided that perhaps some people were just meant to walk through life alone. He had made peace with that, or at least he had convinced himself he had. He had his daughter, his work, his morning runs, and his evening whiskey. That was enough. That had to be enough. If you have ever felt that kind of resignation, that quiet acceptance of a half-lived life, I want you to drop a heart in the comments below, because this story is about to show you why settling for survival is the greatest betrayal we can commit against our own hearts. Eleanor Mitchell moved into the house across the street on a crisp September morning. Daniel had been working in his home office when Sophie had knocked on his door and said, "Dad, you need to come look at this." He had assumed it was something to do with the neighbor's cat getting into their garden again. But when he walked to the window, he saw a moving truck and a woman directing the movers with the calm authority of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. She was striking in a way that made Daniel momentarily forget how to form coherent thoughts. Tall with long silky hair the color of rich mahogany that caught the sunlight and seemed to glow, and skin so fair it looked like porcelain against her burgundy sweater. She moved with a grace that suggested she had spent years being comfortable in her own body, confident without being arrogant, elegant without being pretentious. "She's pretty," Sophie had said, a teasing note in her voice. "Maybe you should go introduce yourself." "I'm not going to ambush the woman while she's trying to move in," Daniel had replied, but his voice had sounded strange even to his own ears. "You're blushing, Dad." "I am not blushing. I'm a grown man. Grown men don't blush. Your face is literally the color of a tomato right now." He had walked away from the window with as much dignity as he could muster, which admittedly was not very much at all, but he had watched from his office as the movers carried furniture into the house. And he had noticed that there was no husband, no partner, no one who seemed to belong to her except for a fluffy white cat that she had carried inside herself, cradled in her arms like a baby. Over the following weeks, he had learned small things about her through the casual observation that was impossible to avoid when you lived on a quiet suburban street. She was an early riser, often seen on her porch with a cup of coffee as the sun came up. She gardened, spending hours planting flowers that bloomed in colors so vibrant they looked almost defiant against the approaching autumn. She received frequent deliveries of books, the packages piling up on her porch, until she collected them in the evening. And she was, according to the neighborhood gossip that Sophie brought home from school, a retired professor of art history who had traveled the world and had never been married. Never been married at 51. Daniel had asked, trying to sound casual. "That's what Mrs. Patterson said." She also said that she's probably weird or hiding something, because nobody stays single that long without a reason. Mrs. Patterson is a judgmental old bat who thinks anyone who doesn't live exactly like her is suspicious. Sophie had grinned at him. "You're defending her pretty passionately for someone you've never actually spoken to." Their first real conversation happened because of a disaster. Daniel had been grilling burgers in the backyard for Sophie's birthday party when the propane tank had decided to give up on life entirely. He had stood there staring at the dying flames with 12 hungry teenagers waiting inside and absolutely no backup plan. That was when Eleanor had appeared at his fence holding a full propane tank, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I heard what sounded like someone cursing at an inanimate object. With impressive creativity she had, said, her voice warm with amusement. I assumed you might need this. He had stared at her for a moment, taking in the way the afternoon light caught her hair and the slight smile playing at the corners of her lips. I was having a polite conversation with my grill about its life choices. It was completely civil. Of course, the phrase worthless piece of garbage is a known term of endearment in some cultures. You heard that from across the street? My kitchen window was open. I also heard something about sending it to grill hell, which I found particularly creative. He had laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in longer than he could remember. Thank you for this. You've saved me from having to explain to a dozen teenagers why they're eating cereal for dinner. Happy to help. I'm Eleanor, by the way. I suppose I should have introduced myself weeks ago, but I've been hiding from the Neighborhood Welcome Committee and their aggressive casserole deliveries. Daniel, and I understand completely. Mrs. Patterson's tuna surprise should be classified as a biological weapon. That had made her laugh, a rowl laugh that crinkled the corners of her eyes and transformed her elegant beauty into something warmer, more approachable. I knew I liked you. Anyone who understands the thread of Mrs. Patterson's cooking is automatically a friend. If you are enjoying this story so far, take a moment to hit that like button because it helps more people discover these videos. And trust me, this story is just getting started. Their friendship developed slowly, organically, in the way that the best relationships often do. She would bring over vegetables from her garden, and he would invite her to stay for coffee. She would text him photos of particularly absurd things she found in antique shops, and he would reply with architectural drawings he had sketched while bored in meetings. Sophie adored her, perhaps because Eleanor treated her like an intelligent adult rather than a child, discussing art and literature and travel with a genuine interest that teenagers could always detect as authentic. But Daniel kept her at a distance even as he felt himself drawn to her in ways that terrified him. He made sure to mention Catherine to reference his failed marriage, to drop hints about how he was not looking for anything romantic. Eleanor never pushed, never made him uncomfortable. But sometimes he would catch her looking at him with an expression he could not quite read, something soft and patient, as if she were waiting for him to figure out something he was too stubborn to see. Why do you do that? She asked him one evening after he had deflected another moment of genuine connection with a joke about his own inadequacies. Do what? Use your humor like a shield. Every time we get close to anything real, you make a joke and step back. He had been quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. Because the last time I let myself be real with someone, she looked me in the eyes and told me she had never loved me, and I had believed for 17 years that we were happy. So either I'm completely incapable of reading people or I'm fundamentally unlovable. Neither option makes me eager to try again. Eleanor had reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Or she was the one who was broken, and you've been punishing yourself for her inability to recognize what she had. He had pulled his hand away, not harshly, but deliberately. You don't know that. I know that your daughter adores you, that you have friends who light up when you walk into a room, that you remember every little thing people tell you because you actually listen. I know that you work from home not because you have to, but because you wanted to be present for Sophie's childhood. I know that you noticed I was struggling with loneliness in a new place and went out of your way to make me feel welcome without ever making me feel pitied. Those are not the actions of an unlovable man, Daniel. Those are the actions of someone who loves so deeply that it terrifies him. He had not known what to say to that, so he had made a joke about her psychoanalysis skills, and she had let him, but the look in her eyes had said she understood exactly what he was doing and why. Winter came, and with it came the anniversary of his divorce, a day he always spent pretending everything was fine while falling apart inside. Sophie had gone to a friend's house for a sleepover, and Daniel had found himself alone in his dark living room with a bottle of whiskey, staring at old photographs and wondering where it had all gone wrong. That was when his phone had buzzed with a text from Eleanor. I saw your lights are off. Are you sitting in the dark, brooding like a Victorian novel protagonist? He had typed back, I prefer to think of myself as a tortured artist. You design buildings, very practical, very non-tortured buildings. I'll have you know that my last project was a very tortured parking garage. Come over, I have wine and I just bake cookies, and I refuse to let you spend tonight alone feeling sorry for yourself. He had hesitated, his finger hovering over the keyboard. I'm not great company right now. I didn't ask you to be great company. I asked you to come eat cookies. There's a difference. So he had gone trudging across the street in the cold December air, and he had spent the evening on her couch while she played old vinyl records and told him stories about her years traveling through Europe studying Renaissance art. She had not asked him to talk about what was bothering him, had not prodded or pried, had simply created a space where he did not have to perform happiness he did not feel. Why aren't you married, he had asked, suddenly emboldened by wine and the strange intimacy of the quiet night. And I'm sorry if that's rude, but I can't figure you out, Eleanor. You're beautiful. You're brilliant. You're kind. Why hasn't someone claimed you? She had smiled, but there was something sad around the edges. People don't claim each other, Daniel. That's not how love works, and the answer is complicated, but the simple version is that I spent my 20s and 30s chasing my career, traveling, building a life that was full and rich, but deliberately solitary. By the time I realized I might want something different, I was in my 40s, and most men my age wanted younger women, and younger men wanted older women as a conquest, not a partner. I dated, I tried, but it never felt right. It never felt like coming home. Do you regret it sometimes? Mostly on quiet nights when my house feels too empty. But I also got to see the sunrise over the Acropolis, spend a year living in a small village in Tuscany, teach students who went on to do incredible things. My life has been full, even if it hasn't been conventional. He had looked at her in the soft lamplight, at the way her hair fell across her shoulders, and the gentle curve of her smile, and he had felt something shift inside his chest, a dangerous loosening of the walls he had so carefully built. But here is where the story takes a turn that neither of them expected. And if you think you know where this is going, I promise you, you do not. Stay with me. 3 months after that night, 3 months of growing closer, of shared dinners and long conversations, and attention neither of them would acknowledge, Daniel's ex-wife returned. Catherine appeared on his doorstep one evening, looking smaller than he remembered, fragile in a way that immediately made him suspicious. She had made a mistake, she said. She had been going through a crisis when she left, had been diagnosed with depression that had clouded her judgment, and she wanted another chance. She missed Sophie. She missed him. She missed their family. Daniel had felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. Part of him, the part that had spent 5 years wondering what was wrong with him, had wanted to believe her. But another part, a newer and stronger part, had looked at Catherine and felt absolutely nothing. I need time to think, he had told her, and she had nodded, had left her new phone number, had looked at him with eyes that were too calculating to be truly repentant. He had not told Eleanor, and that was his first mistake. When Sophie had mentioned to Eleanor that her mother was back and trying to reconcile, Eleanor had gone quiet in a way that Daniel would later realize was the sound of her heart breaking. She had pulled away after that, gently but unmistakably. The invitations to dinner stopped. The texts became less frequent. When they spoke, she was warm but distant, as if she had already accepted an outcome that had not yet been decided. What Daniel did not know, what he would not learn until much later, was that Eleanor had begun writing him a letter. A letter, confessing everything she felt, everything she had been afraid to say out loud, everything she had held back because she believed he needed to figure out his own heart first. She had written that letter over the course of 3 weeks, pouring her soul onto the paper, and then she had put it in a drawer and decided she would never send it because what right did she have to complicate his life when his family might be coming back together? But then came the night of the photo. Daniel had been up late, unable to sleep, his mind churning with confusion about Catherine and Eleanor and the future he could not seem to envision clearly. That was when his phone had buzzed with the message from Eleanor, the photo that had started this entire story. He had opened it, expecting something innocuous, maybe a picture of her cat or a book she was reading. Instead, he had found himself looking at an oil painting, still wet on the canvas, illuminated by the soft light of her studio. The painting was of a house on a quiet street with warm light spilling from the windows and a figure standing at the fence, looking across at another figure on a porch. It was them. It was his house and her house, and the space between them that had always felt both vast and electric. "Do you think it's beautiful?" she had asked. He had stared at the image for a long time, his heart pounding against his ribs because he understood what she was really asking. She was asking if what they had was worth fighting for. She was asking if he could see what she saw when she looked at their strange and wonderful friendship that had become something neither of them had words for. And in that moment, Daniel finally understood what he wanted. He had gotten out of bed, had walked out of his house, in his pajamas and bare feet despite the cold, and had crossed the street to her door. When she opened it, her eyes red from crying, her hair disheveled, looking more beautiful than he had ever seen her. He had said the only thing that mattered. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I'm terrified that I almost let it slip away because I was too afraid to believe I deserved it. Eleanor had looked at him for a long moment and then she had said, "Catherine came back." She did. And all I could think about was you. All I could wonder was why I was even considering giving her another chance when the woman who makes me feel more alive than I have in years lives 30 faff away. And I've been too stupid and scared to tell her how I feel. Daniel, I'm in love with you, Eleanor. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how it happened, but I know that when I imagine my future, you're the only one in it. Not Catherine, not some imaginary person I haven't met yet. You, with your art and your books and your way of seeing right through my deflections. You who brought me a propane tank and made me laugh for the first time in years. You who sat with me on the worst night of my year and didn't ask me to be anything other than exactly what I was. She had started crying then, tears streaming down her face, and for a terrible moment, Daniel had thought he had made a mistake. But then she had pulled him inside and kissed him, and everything he had been afraid of melted away into something that felt like finally coming home. I wrote you a letter, she had confessed later, curled against his chest on her couch. A very long, very embarrassing letter about how I've been falling in love with you for months. I want to read it. Absolutely not. I'll summarize. You're wonderful. I'm terrified. Please don't choose your ex-wife over me. I could never choose her over you. I was just too afraid to admit it to myself. We're both idiots, aren't we? Complete and utter idiots. But at least we're idiots together now. She had laughed, that beautiful, genuine laugh that crinkled the corners of her eyes, and Daniel had known with absolute certainty that this was exactly where he was supposed to be. The road ahead was not without challenges. Catherine did not accept his decision gracefully, and there were weeks of tension and difficult conversations before she finally accepted that their marriage was truly over and stopped trying to manipulate him through Sophie. Sophie herself had needed time to adjust, not because she did not like Eleanor, but because the idea of her father being with anyone other than her mother had been strange at first. But Eleanor had been patient, never trying to replace Catherine, simply being her authentic self and letting Sophie come to her in her own time. And Daniel had to learn how to be vulnerable again, how to share his fears and his hopes without hiding behind jokes and deflections. Eleanor had called him out every time he tried to retreat, gently but firmly, reminding him that she had not fallen in love with his armor, but with the man underneath it. A year later, on the anniversary of the night she had sent him the photo Daniel had taken, Eleanor back to the same spot in her living room where he had first confessed his love. But this time he had gotten down on one knee and asked her to spend the rest of her life with him. "I know we're not young," he had said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know we both come with baggage and histories and years of learning to live alone. But I also know that every single day with you has been better than the best day I ever had before I met you. I know that loving you has made me a better father, a better person, a better man, and I know that I don't want to spend another day without being able to call you my wife." Eleanor had been crying too hard to speak at first, but she had nodded, had whispered yes through her tears, and had let him slide the ring onto her finger. They were married in her garden the following spring, surrounded by the flowers she had planted when she first moved in, with Sophie as the maid of honor, and their neighbors and friends filling the small space with love and laughter. It was not a fancy wedding, not a grand affair, but it was perfect. It was them. Now, 5 years later, Daniel often looks back at that night when his phone buzzed with a message from his neighbor and marvels at how close he came to missing the best thing that ever happened to him. If he had been too afraid to walk across the street, if he had chosen the familiar safety of his loneliness over the terrifying risk of love, he would have missed this life. He would have missed waking up next to Eleanor every morning, missed the way she still makes him laugh, missed the family they have built together. The lesson he learned, the one he hopes you will take with you from this story, is that it is never too late to choose love. It is never too late to knock down the walls we build to protect ourselves and let someone see who we really are. Yes, it is terrifying. Yes, there is a chance of getting hurt. But the alternative, the gray half-life of playing it safe, is so much worse than any heartbreak could ever be. Eleanor once told Daniel that the most beautiful art is created when someone is brave enough to put their heart on the canvas, even knowing that critics might tear it apart. Love is the same. It requires us to be brave, to be vulnerable, to risk everything for the chance of something extraordinary. So, if you are watching this and you have been afraid to take a chance on love, whether it is a new relationship or an old friendship that could become something more, I hope this story has given you courage. I hope you will cross your own street, send your own message, speak the words you have been holding back because the people who transform our lives are not always the ones we expect. Sometimes they are the neighbor across the street, the colleague we have known for years, the friend who has been quietly waiting for us to see what was there all along. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, I would be so grateful if you would like this video and subscribe to this channel. Your support means everything to me and allows me to keep creating stories like this one. Stories about second chances and unexpected love and the courage it takes to open our hearts. And now I want to hear from you. I am so curious to know where you are watching from today. Drop a comment below telling me your country, and while you are there, share what you thought of Daniel and Eleanor's journey. Did it remind you of anyone in your own life? Have you ever taken a risk on love that changed everything? I read every single comment and I love connecting with this amazing community we are building together. Remember, it is never too late for your own beautiful story to begin. You just have to be brave enough to write the first chapter.